What's going on, guys? Welcome back, and today I'm going to be starting this video once again a little bit differently. So I'm going to start introducing a segment which I'm going to just sort of sprinkle into my videos here and there called Will It Paint Handle? Yes, that's right, if Games Workshop can keep reinventing the wheel and selling us new painting handles, can anything be a paint handle? So to start off my new little segment, I'm going to have the Games Workshop official paint handle. Right, that's enough of that. Next up we have packing foam with a paper clip and a bit of blue tack on it. Will it paint handle? Yes, I feel like it did. Bottle of beer, will it paint handle? Yes, I feel like this did as well. Also, a lovely drink for afterwards. A lovely chewy refresher sent to me by Griffin Gaming for my latest order. Will it paint handle? Yes, it bloody will. Pin vise, yes it will. It was also quite handy because the top swivels, so I didn't have to rotate it in my hand all the time. Will it paint handle? I think it will. Now we're going to finish up with an Xbox controller, and yes, I think it will paint handle. Anyway guys, any suggestions for what you want me to see if it will paint handle next, please leave them down in the comments and I will make sure to get around to them. So, on with the video, and tanks. Tanks, troop transports, self-propelled guns, the lot. I love them, especially in 40k, because they really do sort of go with the whole grim dark. How many guns can this block of metal carry? And you see that thing over there, yes, that approaching army, I want it to go away, please. And that's what I love about these vehicles. Now, there's many renditions of painting styles here, but this is my very first Lehman Russ I ever painted up when I was about 14. And this was all painted by hand. It's got a new turret on it, which was 3D printed, because my dog chewed up the original turret for this. And I couldn't find any replacements, so I bought a 3D printed one, which is also great because I can swap out the gun fixtures on it, so I have it armed in any way I want. But I digress. So going on about vehicles still, that's what the main thing I like about 40k verse is the fact that you can either have the tank looking like it's brand new off the production line, straight into battle. You can have it almost pristine. Or you can have it as grim, grimy, dirty as possible. It's been battling away, and it's totally, and it won't look out of place either. Because what I'm going to do in the painting steps later is I'm going to paint up the main chassis of the Manticore missile launch system to look like it's been slogging away and it's been hard fighting, but the weapons, the actual Manticore missiles, are replenishable. So those, I've painted them up pretty pristine. So they're, he's fired his load, he's gone back, he's rearmed, and he's back out on the battlefield, ready to send those missiles off into the heretic lines, into the alien, into whatever's against him at that point. Anyway, enough of my talking. Let's get on with the rest of the showcase of my vehicles, and then on to the paint jobs, yeah. So long ago, before I'd even considered putting myself out there onto YouTube, I started this manticore. I assembled it, I base coated it, and this was before I had my airbrush, so I used rattle can, and then it's just sat on my pile of shame going, anyone gonna paint me? Apparently not. So anyway, I've been down to my local model shop just to see what selection of paints were down there. Now this isn't a Games Workshop, it's not an independent Games Workshop style shop, it is just a modelling shop. So, you know, it's Airfix, it's Tamiya, yeah, there's no Citadel paint in sight, which is lovely. So I've been trying to find a cheaper solution to the Castellan Green Air, which is about £6 a pot. But I found that this Russian Green by Vallejo Model Air is almost spot on. It's a little bit darker, but once it's on the model, it's not that much more noticeable. As you see, I'm just going to do a quick test on the bottom of this Manticore launcher, just to find out what the colour difference will be. Now that I've seen the colour difference and I'm happy with the colour and how it dries onto the model, I'm going to crack out my airbrush and cover the tank in its first coat of the green. So now that our first layer of green is down, time to add a brighter colour to our paint pot. Oh, look at that! Pale sand! Oh, I must be getting up there in the world. So into our airbrush pot, we're just going to add a slight drop of pale sand, brighten up that green, to then do our next layer, which is going to be like a highlighting layer. Then we'll do that again until I feel like I've brought up the colour enough to give it a nice highlight before we start adding the camouflage pattern, so that when I do the next layer or the next colour even, I can leave the tape on and I'm not going to have to struggle to then come back in and highlight this green. So now that we've got our green layers on, and I've gone really bright as sort of like the top highlighting colour, just because it will be getting dulled right back down again later when we use oils and washes to grime this up. So now that that's done, it's time to get the camouflage pattern on. Now, I love to use this masking tape that I got from Halfords, and it's designed to curve, so it doesn't just rip, and it goes around corners quite nicely, and you can get a nice pattern on it from ripping it up and moving it around, and it gets a nice firm placement onto the body of the tank because it's crimpled to begin with, so it fits down into all those little cracks and crannies. So if you've got anything like this, or if you're in the UK, get yourself down to Halfords, buy yourself a couple of rolls of this, and it will do you. Right, this I ran out of this, and I use this stuff religiously for everything. Any type of masking, I just use it. So I would say get yourself down there, buy yourself some. I think it was only like £1.50. And for God's sake, if you're wearing a glove, just take the glove off. It got so irritating. So much better. Right, and here's another little lesson I've learned. Put lots on. Put lots of tape on, cover up lots of areas. So I've done it before, I've gone, oh yeah, that looks alright. I've painted it, then I've put the second layer on, I've gone, oh, everything, it might as well just be a sandy coloured tank now, because I didn't put enough masking down. So if you want lots of green showing, put lots of tape down. If you don't want lots of green showing, don't put lots of tape down. It's as simple as that. And just remember as well that patterns in nature are random. There's no such thing as a straight line. So I tend to use one bit of tape for the central part, and then I tear another bit in half in a diagonal line, and that forms the sides. So it's not so much of a straight line showing. Of course you can have them if you want them. Depends on what pattern you're painting it, but this is how I'm painting them. And also tacking on an amendment to an amendment of the main video. When it comes to your tank, paint whatever camouflage pattern you want on it. As long as it fits in your army. Even if it doesn't, If you're happy with how it looks, that is the important thing. That's the most important part of this, is that you are happy with how your tank looks. Right, so now I'm going to be getting the second colour down, which is a nice khaki colour, so it all fits in with my Armoured company that I've got going on here. Once we've done that, we're just going to let everything dry, everything settle. Got to go watch some fireworks quickly because it's nearly Guy Fawkes night, and let's have some fun with that then, yeah? Ooh, this bit's so satisfying. It's time to take the masking tape off. Ooh. Okay, so it's looking good. I'm liking it. Doesn't matter about the bottom. No one's going to be looking at the bottom of it. But I'm loving the pattern that's down. And now all we need to do is get those details fixed onto there. So I'm going to be painting up the tracks, doing all the little details on there. I'm going to make the launcher rack. I'm going to paint that with silver. So it's all going to be dry brushed on. Wash over it. Dry brush again. And that's going to make it look like stained metal. And when we're painting the tracks, don't be too hard on yourself, because we're going to muddy them up later. So if you spit a little bit of silver over or a little bit of black over, whatever, doesn't matter. No one's going to see it. It's going to be blended in with the rest of it. So from what I've found out from painting track details, is the best way to start off is with a watered down black, so it fills into all those little recesses which the brush isn't going to reach, and it just saves a bit of time later. Well, so you want to do 2 coats, one that is going to be nice and watered down, let that dry, do another coat over the top with less water, not as watered down, just to get those top layers where the pigment would have sunk away from the top to go down to those recesses. Now it's time for the good old staple of my diet when it comes to painting, dry brushing. Yeah, that's right, I'm lazy as... And so that's the easiest way that I find to do tracks. Get them black, dry brush them, and we're going to do pick out all the little metal details on it now, so that when we come to do the weathering effects later, it's already done and we don't have to worry about going back over with them. Once that's done, we're going to be doing our first wash for the weathering effect, which is going to be Agrax Earth onto the launcher rack, and it's going to go just onto the launcher rack because everything else is going to be done with Gnome oil, which I'm going to stick into my airbrush to cover the entirety of the tank. While we wait for that first layer of wash to dry, what we're going to do is just going to go do one of my other little favourite things, which is do all the chipping now. I'm going to use Rhydox hide, and then I'm actually going to be centering that with silver instead, because there's 2 different variants of colour on here, so it's going to be harder to do that stippling effect that I usually do with a sponge. But this one works just as easy, and it's just going to be doing a lot of all the lining and all the panelling, a bit of Rhydox hide, and then hit it in the centre with some steel. So once all that's done, I'm going to load up my airbrush with some Gnome oil, and like an absolute madman, throw it all over the model. Get it all over all those parts. Try and avoid the launcher rack if possible, but you know, these things happen. It's not the end of the world. So I'm just going to cover absolutely everything in Gnome oil. And before that dries, we need to go on to our next step, which is adding the rust effect. So this is the Vallejo rust wash that I've used in previous videos. Absolutely love this stuff. I'm going to be really upset if I can never find another bottle of it again, which I'm sure I will be able to when it runs out, which is going to be soon. So the reason we're doing it while it's still wet is to make sure everything mixes in together, and it gives us a really nice effect when it dries. So you'll see that effect later on, but until that point you're gonna have to trust me. So now that all our washes have dried, I'm going to go in now and start picking out details that we want to be noticeable later. So I'm just starting off with some red on the weapons targeting system on top of the launcher rack, doing the wires, skulls and scrolls, all those little bits that we want to be noticeable later once the paint job's complete. I'm just going to very quickly go over how I do the lamps on my tanks. It's quite a simple technique. I start off with a bit of wet blending and then goes into sort of a stippling motion. So I'm going to get that dark colour on there first. Once that's complete, I'm going to move on to the second colour. So I'm going from darker up to lighter and lighter and lighter. I'm just wet blending those into each other. So I choose a higher point, and then on the direct opposite of it, I do a smaller shading of what comes up to be lighter. At the very height of it, our final colour is going to be using pure white, but we're still sort of wet blending it in. So that's where the stippling motion comes in, just to give it that final little look where it gets up to the white. And then later on, when we're doing the varnishes, so once the model's completely done, I'll then go over that lens area with a gloss varnish instead of a matte varnish, just to give it that extra level of shine. Right, we are so close to the end now. So the final stages is to add the mud. So we've done all the weathering effects. So we've made it look oily, we've made it look rusty, we've made it look scratched, and we've made it look used. We've got our missiles looking lovely. So this mud effect that we're going to be putting on, we're going to make sure to splash some of that mud onto the missiles to make it sort of all incorporate in, because he hasn't just collected them. They've been sat on there for a little while, but not enough to get scratched, just enough to get a bit muddy. And as you've been able to see in the background there, what we're doing is just with a toothbrush, bloody hell, a toothpick and a paintbrush, we're just going to be splashing it on, so it doesn't look painted on, it doesn't look like it's been forced on there. So we're going to follow the track line, and then we're going to do once down the sides and once across the front and once across the rear, just so it's got that bit of splash on it, and it's not uniformly put onto the model. And the two weathering effect paints that I'm using here are both by Vallejo. One's called European Dust and the other one is Russian Mud. So the mud one's darker, the dust one's lighter. Then the only part that we are going to paint on, we're going to paint a nice line of it at the base of the tracks that you can see I've done here, and then we're going to add our pigment onto that, because that's then going to gloop up and give it a nice firm texture, and then when it dries it will crackle. Then over the top we'll water down that European Dust and get that in there so that it has a nice effect to make it look like there's wet mud, there's dry mud, and it's crackled through to give us a nice two-tone or multi-toned mud effect. And all that pigment that's just lying there, I'm going to use my airbrush just to fire it onto the side of the tank. I'm then going to drop some down, do the same on the other side, and that gives a really nice final little effect that we get for free without wasting too much of our pigment. So there we go. Guys, as always, it's been an absolute bloody pleasure. I'll see you in the next one.